earlier, but the meeting's being recorded. So, and also just please mute your microphone so we can keep the background noise to a minimum. And unless you're speaking, in which case you can unmute. And if you don't wish to be on the recording, you can turn off your video. So, okay, so moving right along. I'm Linda Quinby. I'm the treasurer of our branch, and I'm here on behalf of our co-presidents. Sally is out of town on business, and Pat is out of town on a cruise ship. So I drew the short straw, and here I am. So today's program will be Karen Vanderwerken and Chelsea Sparty, who you've already met, Chelsea. And then after the program, we'll be having some announcements, and I give you some teasers here. We'll be talking about the next meeting, about nominations, about lobby days, and the stars among us. So stay tuned after the program. So today's program. First, I'd like to introduce Karen Vanderwerken. Karen is our current AUW California AUW Fund Director for the state of California. And she's also San Diego County Interbranch Council IBC President. Karen has a BA in English and Psychology and an MA in English from Ball State University in Indiana. She served for 24 years as Executive Director of the American Institute of Banking and the Center for Financial Training. She was a named gift honoree from both our branch and also the Fort Worth, Texas branch. She's past president of AUW Tarrant County, Texas. And for our branch, she's previously been the fund director and program director. She's a dual member of Del Mar-Leucadia and the Carlsbad Oceanside Vista branch and lives here in Carlsbad. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Karen.
Good morning, ladies. It's really nice to be here. I have missed several of your meetings, especially this fall, busy being the fund director. I like to say it's the fund director. We had several programs. I'll give those later in the meeting about the fund programs, but at any rate, that has kept the weekends very busy. So part of that's your fault that I'm not attending. So, and putting a little bit of blame, or probably blame, on Linda herself. I had just moved here about 7 years ago. I remember driving down in San Diego, and then I could tell that this call was going to go on a long time. So I pulled off a side street, and she was explaining how this branch needed a fund director and how I should do that. And I was explaining to her how that wasn't going to happen. And probably after 20, 25 minutes, I thought, it's going to be easier to say yes to this than to keep explaining no. And so that's I see the story straight. I've given that story before. And I says, I thought I was persistent, but she's got us all beat in there. So any rate, when things go wrong that I do, and there are many of them, we can go back to say, Linda, you shouldn't have done that. All right, well, this morning, I had the pleasure of introducing, and we don't have favorites in our 41 speakers, the scholar speakers, but if I was going to have one, it would be Chelsea. Chelsea, her research project investigates climate injustice, justice implications and social benefits of the electricity system, the resilience as a disaster recovery strategy. And prior to entering graduate school, as she just talked to those of us who came earlier, she served as a Fulbright Scholar in Sarawak, Malaysia. She's worked 3 years in the private sector and 4 years at a nonprofit advancing nuclear waste policy. And Sparty, she has a master's degree in as a master's student in Energy and Resources Group at the University of California, Berkeley. And some of you, if you had attended one of the fall events that Chelsea was in, you saw her 5-minute presentation on this. And this is the time when branches can reach back out to the scholars and say, this branch would like to hear more than the 5 minutes. Give us the fuller presentation. So Chelsea, welcome. Let's go for it.
Thank you so much, Karen and Linda and everyone else on the call. I really appreciate the chance to be here with all of you. Now let's see, can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay, give me 1 second. What about now?
Yes,
Okay,
perfect.
so there we go. Okay. Thank you for offering me time to speak today. And I wanted to check, are we still 30 minutes for presentation?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Sounds good. So I'll be talking today about rethinking resilience in the electricity recovery process in Puerto Rico. And I want to start by saying that this is work that I have been invited to do, and I do it with other folks that live on the island of Puerto Rico, namely people that lead the group Comité Diálogo Ambiental, which is based in the south of the island. Today, I'll talk a bit about my background, some of the context in Puerto Rico to ground this conversation, the results and the next steps, and other opportunities for action on this topic. And because we're being recorded, I'm going to leave this abstract up for a few seconds for those who want to read it and are new to this and can review this on the recorded video. So I'd like to start by honoring the people who came before us, the inspiring women on this call, the women who paved the way for all of us to achieve what we do today, the Boricua or Puerto Rican research partners that I work with, my mentor, who's also an AAUW alumna, my professors who really encourage and push me to ask bigger questions, and my family and ancestors whose courage and support sustain me to this day. This picture are my native Wintu, indigenous to California ancestors. They're the matriarchs of my family, Juanita and Kitty Cop Cop met. Some background on me. I graduated 10 years ago with a degree in biology as an undergrad. And immediately following my undergrad studies, I traveled to Sarawak, Borneo Island, which is part of Malaysia. It's one of the oldest, most ancient forests on Earth. And I lived in a small farming town and learned about environmental destruction and harm done by a mega dam there in Sarawak. And that is one of my first real experiences with the way that energy affects not only our lives, where we live, but also our access to fish and food. And the people of Sarawak introduced me to these bigger picture issues once energy is accessible. Following that, I worked 8 years, like I shared, mostly in Del Mar, advancing energy policy and environmental justice as it relates to the storage of radioactive waste at nuclear power plants. And now I am a master's student at UC Berkeley. I'm up here in the Bay Area, and I also work part-time at Berkeley National Lab on teams that work in energy justice, natural hazards mitigation, and how that affects the electricity system. And we have so many folks up here in the Bay Area that are working on this. We have the regulator, the California Public Utility Commission. And so I'm in a really great innovative space here. Back to my work in Del Mar, I wanted to share some of this work that I did This is a concert at the Belly Up Tavern where we brought music and speakers to introduce the community to the issues at San Onofre. And this really speaks to the impact of the place that I worked, the Samuel Lawrence Foundation based in Del Mar. It also speaks to the way that I like to approach my work in community and with a variety of entry points. So the artists and musicians felt like they could approach this issue, as did Native American folks from the community. As you can see from this picture, it's intergenerational. We had folks in their 80s and people as young as 21. So it was really fun. We put on this concert twice before the pandemic happened, and it completely changed the engagement on the topic of radioactive waste for us. Here's another picture from the entrance. And then here's some of the folks that run the Belly Up, some of my mentors from Washington, DC. Some of you might recognize Francine from formerly worked with Mike Levin, and myself and the colleague that I mentored, Amanda, are on the far left. Again, honoring those research partners I mentioned before. This is Ruth, who is also an AAUW alumna, and she is a leading attorney in Puerto Rico who has truly advanced electricity issues and other legal concerns on the island. She's a force, and I'm so grateful to know her. One thing that I would like to say as I'm starting out is that this project a year ago was initially introduced as doing interviews. And in the midst of this year, Puerto Rico has faced more storms, namely Hurricane Fiona. And at that point, it was necessary for me to make adjustments to my methods, because doing interviews at a time when people were hurting and trying to recover again wouldn't have been conscious and appropriate. So that's a bit of my redirection. I'll talk about those methods and how that shifted and how